Hi everybody, it's Ashley. Welcome back to my channel, and today I am going to be doing my September wrap-up. I am very happy with this wrap-up. Um, I didn't 100% complete my TBR because I strayed from it a lot. I still read a lot, but I strayed from that TBR. So let's just go right ahead and get into the books. The first book that I read this month was The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. This was part of my 3 thriller vlog that I did towards the beginning of the month. And if you watched that video, then you will know I hated this book. It was awful. I don't think that Lucy Foley is for me. And I know that she's like a beloved author for a lot of people, but for me, I'm just not jiving with her style very much. I did not like any of the characters. They were all extremely unlikable, and I just didn't care what happened to them. I didn't care who died. I didn't care who the perpetrator was. I just didn't care, and I wanted to, because this had all the elements of things that I normally like, with the isolated setting and the whodunit aspect, but I just didn't care about these people in the least, and I ended up being very disappointed in it. I think I rated it a 2-star. I'm sorry. I will be giving her one more try with the Paris apartment because that came in my book of the month add-ons. But if I don't like that, then I'm going to be done with Lucy Foley because I didn't like this or the guest list very well. The next book that I read this month was The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This was also part of the 3 thriller vlog, and this one is my favorite book of the year so far. I absolutely loved everything about this. We are following mostly a woman named Carly who is looking into the 20-year-old, I believe, disappearance of her Aunt Vivian. And the way that she goes about this is she goes to the same motel that her aunt worked at. She even lives in the same apartment. She's trying to get into the same mindset as her aunt in the way that she was in that walk of life, and kind of live things as she lived them, to see if she could figure out what happened. And there's all these supernatural elements to it. It's spooky, it's atmospheric, it's very, very page turning from page 1 to the very end. I loved every second of this, and I cannot wait to read more Simone St. James. I believe she's going to shape up to be one of my favorite authors, if everything else, anything even close to this one. The next book that I read this month was 56 Days by Catherine Ryan Howard. This was the final book in the 3 thriller vlog, and in this one we follow 2 people named Oliver and Sierra, and they meet just as COVID is hitting the Irish shores. And he proposes once lockdown comes into effect. He proposes that they move in together so that they don't have to be apart. And we learn through the book that it's like everybody's keeping secrets. They're not who they think they are. And we know relatively early on that there is a body in an apartment that we later find out is Oliver. So we know that one of them is gone. One of them has passed, and the other one is nowhere to be found. So we're like, okay, something went tragically wrong. I didn't expect to like this. I did enjoy it. It was longer than it needed to be, I felt like. I felt like the COVID thing wasn't really necessary because other than putting them in the same apartment, it really didn't do anything for the story. I felt like that could have been accomplished any number of other ways. But overall, the writing style was interesting. And like the mystery aspect of it was interesting. I don't think I would read this again, but I would be willing to read more by this author. So if you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments down below. The next book that I read this month was Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I was so happy with this one. This was like a Riley Sager redemption for me. Because the very first book that I read by him was Sometimes I Lie, Last Time I Lied? Something like that. And I didn't like that book. And I was just like, oh, what is the big deal about Riley Sager? And then the next book that I read was Home Before Dark, but the aspects of that, it was about a haunted house, which I almost always like. So I was like, that one's a fluke. That one's a fluke. I can't really judge his writing based on that. But this was the true test. This is about a woman named Quincy who is the sole survivor of a massacre. It is 10 years after the fact. We're seeing how she's dealing with her trauma. When another final girl from another massacre dies, she begins to believe that somebody is stalking the final girls. And it's more of a psychological thriller than a horror. But it's very, very fast paced. It's well done. It keeps you guessing. And I just had so much fun with this. And I enjoyed the aspect of seeing the trauma after the fact rather than while it was playing out. I mean, there was a flashback sequence where we saw the events of the night unfold, but the majority of this book is in the present day. So, I mean, I really, really liked that a lot. I gave it 5 stars. I'm very excited to read more Riley Sager now. Now I'm understanding why everybody talks so highly of his work. This is absolutely incredible. The next book that I read this month, yeah, I'm so afraid to say this because I know that I'm going to make some people mad, was The Invisible Life of Addie by Shwab. I hated this. It was so popular a couple of years back. It still kind of is. I still hear about it a lot. It's like, oh, this is so amazing. It's the best thing that she's ever written. And that very well might be true. I've never read anything by V.E. Schwab before. And I will say that this started off really well. And I was invested in it in the beginning. But as time went on, I felt like it got worse and worse and worse. And I really hated the ending. I have a full review coming of this, so if you want to find out why I dislike this so much, stay tuned for that. But if you didn't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know, but The Invisible Life of Addie Larue is a story about a woman who makes a deal with the devil, like back in like 1714, for more time. She basically makes this deal because she's being forced into a marriage that she doesn't want, and she just wants more time to be able to be herself, to do what she wants to do. And the deal ended up going wrong, of course, because it gave her endless time, but nobody can remember who she is after they walk away from her. Until eventually, 300 years later, this one guy does remember. It's an interesting premise. It's very creative. I'll give her an A for creativity. But half of the flashback sequences to like the 1700s were completely unnecessary. The ones starting off, I understood those. But there were plenty of them. I'm like, what did this really add to the story? The person that remembers her, we like get a whole bunch from his point of view. I didn't find that interesting at all. I didn't find it necessary. I was so done with this by the end. This easily could have been chopped in half and been a lot better. The next book that I read this month was The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. I loved this book. It was so much better than the first book that I read, Craven Manor. And I already have a full review for it, so I will link that for you. But this is about a woman who inherits her great aunt's house, who she can't recall ever meeting. And she gets there, it's isolated. All of this strange stuff starts to happen pretty much from the first night. And she finds like all these weird, creepy messages hidden all over the house, like carved into the woodwork. And people in town are telling her all these different versions of her aunt, like she's nice, she's not nice, She just does not know what to think. It was a very wild ride. There's a sequence towards the end that had my skin crawling because it reminded me of a childhood nightmare that I had a lot. Um, it was just so much fun. It was creepy. It wasn't really scary except for that one part, but it was very atmospheric, very, very creepy. I'm really enjoying Darcy Coates' writing style, and that is the reason why I also read two other books by her this month. One was The Carrow Haunt, which I also have a full review for, and I will link that for you down below. But that one is about a tour guide named Remy who is hired to bring in like this supernatural team into the most haunted house in the country, the Carrow house, for 2 weeks. This big storm ends up raging to where they cannot leave, and people start to die. All this other creepy stuff starts happening around the house, and she is regretting taking on this assignment, to say the least. It was fun, and it was written very well, but at the same time, the way that it was written, with the way some of the characters were, it was very reminiscent of a lot of other things. And I don't see it sticking out in my mind for very long, but that is not to say that I didn't enjoy it. The next one that I read by her was Dead Lake, and that one was more of a novella. It was very, very short, but it was so creepy. It was so good. So we have this character. I've already forgot her name. I'm sorry, but she goes to her uncle's cabin for a week because she has been hired to do this set of portraits for this big art gallery, and she wants to be isolated so that she can work on these projects without any interruptions. And when she gets there, this weird stuff starts happening at the lake. She keeps seeing this man who she knows is not supposed to be there, and she keeps waking up after falling asleep, and new portraits that she does not remember painting that are very, very graphic and very concerning in nature have been painted in the night. And she quickly starts to realize that subconsciously, while she's asleep, somebody is trying to tell her something through the paintings. It's very, very unique the way that it's done, and I don't think I've ever read anything like that before. It was very, very, very well done, and it was a very interesting concept. I enjoyed it greatly. Um, yeah, I'm gonna be filming a review for that, so if keep your eyes open, because that, despite being so short, that was a wild ride. I just wanted more. The next book that I read this month was Who Killed John Benet Ramsey by Charles Bosworth Jr. And this just followed the John Benet Ramsey case. It's an infamous case. I really don't need to tell you about it. But it gave like more details, like about the autopsy and things that were found around the house, things that I hadn't previously known. So it was definitely an interesting read. But it was just so sad. The only thing that I will say about this book that did kind of drive me crazy a little bit was it was very clear that the author was biased. It didn't feel like it was written from an objective standpoint. And considering that this case was unsolved, I didn't think that was right. Because it's like, you don't know who did it. Like, everybody's got speculations. But to be writing certain things in the book in a way that they could be construed as fact when it comes to certain people, I didn't like that. It rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, if you have concrete proof, that's one thing, but don't just sit there and just like project your image of what you believe happened to, be the truth. So, I mean, that bothered me quite a bit. The next book that I read this month in a similar vein is My Daddy is a Hero by Lena Derhally. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. And this is about the Chris Watts case. And this one I felt like was written more objectively, which I think is interesting considering they found out who did that pretty much immediately. I mean, he was arrested within like what, 2 days? It was very fast. Um, so it really seemed interesting to me that in this book, um, more respect was given, at least, in the objective standpoint. It wasn't accusatory. I mean, the facts were laid out, but it wasn't like bad mouthing. There was a lot of psychology talk in it, like sociopath, psychopath, narcissism. There are like whole chapters dedicated to that. And I'm like, this isn't a psych book. It's a book about a murder case. So, I mean, I did feel like that was a little bit unnecessary. And I understood where they were going with it because they were trying to be like, well, why did he do this? But nobody really knows why. So, yeah. Those two books were based on two very interesting cases, but I wasn't really crazy about the way that they were written. Maybe true crime nonfiction books just aren't for me. I don't know. But yeah, I'm like, I mean, these are like real people that this happened to. So it bothers me if, I don't know, it bothers me if it's not done in a way that it can, in a way that feels respectful to the victims. I really don't know how to describe what I mean, but hopefully you guys understand. The next book that I read this month was Hourglass by Daniel James. This was sent to me for review, and it is a very interesting book about two guys, these two friends named Kev and Clyde. And Kev has passed away, and he somehow gets pulled back into the real world by Clyde. So it's like they're like working side by side, one human, one ghost. And they get approached by this secret operation of the government called Hourglass. And Hourglass deals with the supernatural aspect of the afterlife. So it's like they are protecting the world and the souls of the people that are still living from, bad forces on the other side, if that makes sense. And they want to recruit Clyde and Kev as agents. A lot of the people that are in this operation are they're kind of like monsters. Like everybody's got a weird form. This was not written badly at all. It was very well written. I could tell that a lot of time was put into it. It was wonderfully edited, and it's like it did have an interesting premise, but it's not really the type of thing that I personally am into. If I hadn't been sent it for review, I probably wouldn't have read it. So I gave it a 4 because I did think that it was written very, very, very well. And it's like I liked the characters. Like the characters were very, very well written. The bromance between Clyde and Kev I thought was very believable. But it's just not my type of thing. I'm not big on like monster stuff, so to speak. So it's like somebody else might enjoy it more than I did, but I still, like I said, I would recommend it to the right audience. Was Nancy Drew Mystery Stories, The 13th Pearl. I have slowly been making my way back through the Nancy Drew books. I've been trying to reread a lot of childhood favorites to see how I feel about them as an adult. And the Nancy Drew books were a big, big part of my childhood. I actually still play the computer games. So it's like I love a good mystery. And it is interesting going back to these books This one I felt like was very problematic from today's standpoint. I could see how at the time it probably wasn't, but like Nancy like at one point goes undercover as I believe it was a Chinese woman, and I'm just like that's not okay. That's not okay. There was just things that kind of rubbed me wrong reading it this time around. It's like it was still a good story, but the times were definitely very, very evident in this book. But I still always enjoy going back through the old Nancy Drew books and my childhood book favorites in general because it has so much nostalgia, such a place in my heart. Reading the same books that got me so interested in reading to begin with, and I had so much fun with it. So I don't regret that at all. But that is all that I have for you guys today. If you liked this video, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, follow me on the social medias, click that bell if you want to be notified of all of my upcoming videos, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!